books, words even. Some of our favorite things as a culture. But what if the machines made them? I've already made that video. It's over there. This is a follow-up where I review them. If you want more context, go watch the first video. Context on the book, not why I just... Anyway, since there's no reason to delay, let's just hang out for a bit. Let's chill. We never talk anymore. You and me. First book, YouTube Kids, seemingly creating a whole new demographic of people I hate. This book was released at some point, probably in the past, I don't know, you don't care, by the aforementioned Anath K, whose publishing appetite is perfectly counteracted by his creative apathy. The first damning omen is the cover, obviously. Not only is it AI slop, but it's also seemingly edited in order to become the cover of the book, but very poorly. Things like edges where the title was added in post, along with, for some reason, this seam, and at some point it must be easier to just have done it better in the first place. Surprisingly, this actually has a preface, and I say surprisingly because it shouldn't have one. It shouldn't exist. A preface, among other things, is a direct statement from the author, almost always giving context and the intention of the book. They're actually very important for a lot of types of books in relaying information, and as a direct result, are kinda boring. Magician has a preface to explain why the book was revised in the first place. The Last Days of Socrates has a preface to define its scope and its intention to be broad, and this very video was prefaced by a joke, which shows you that I'm cool and hip. What would the preface for YouTube Kids even be about? It lacks the philosophical implications of The Last Days of Socrates and can't even compare to the fantasy spellcasting of The Last Days of Socrates. He could do that, by the way. That white boy was clean. The preface for YouTube Kids is an AI model trying to give a book report for something that it definitely hasn't read, probably because it didn't write it yet. The prompt it was given clearly didn't have any more substantial information than the blurb or a rough outline, so it keeps repeating the same platitudes, but as a result, it always uses phrases like, welcome to, or I invite you to a world of wonder. It invites you to read the book like 4 times. I'm already in your house. You don't need to invite me anymore. The premise of the book is some idiot named Alex makes a YouTube channel, gets pretty popular, and then all of the chapters are disconnected vertical slices. Good news, since each chapter is self-contained, the AI model can generate the entire thing in one go. The bad news is, all of the chapters are self-contained and generated in one go. It fosters a shockingly vague aura around every chapter. Nothing that happens later or has already happened ever gets mentioned in the current chapter, so it just feels like reading a poorly translated Chinese proverb or that one Jin episode from Supernatural. Case in point, the first chapter details creating the account and uploading the first video. Pretty basic stuff. Easy setup, easy payoff. Whoops, we're in freefall. Not only is there no object permanence between chapters, there's no permanence of any kind. The first 3 pages detail him and his dad creating the channel. Then he records, edits, and uploads the video. The next paragraph, he does it again, in the present tense. It retells it. It just does it again. That chapter ends as it began. Barely and clouded in vagueness. Like a broken marriage. I'm not gonna pick apart each chapter. We could be here all day and none of us would like that. But if you're wondering what they're about, here are the chapter titles. That's it. You don't need to read them. One notable quirk is that every chapter ends in the exact same way. What a grand time we had. Doing blank. What adventures await us in the future? The word adventure, by the way, is used a shocking amount to describe the activities of a socially barren child. Not only that, every chapter somehow relates back to YouTube. Like there's a talent show and it's just like, how will I connect this to YouTube? It's so strange. The specific phrasing is the literary equivalent to swelling music at the end of an action movie as they're all staring off into the sunset. It has all the aesthetics of a concluding narrative that's also leaving the door open to a potential sequel, but then the book has the audacity to keep going, and my job is never finished. It's especially weird because The story more or less runs its course by the third chapter, and has a lot in common with a TV show that's being kept alive long after its natural conclusion, to the point where the last two chapters, 1 Million Dreams and The Big Milestone, are about the same event, happening the exact same way. The milestone is 1 million subscribers. I don't know if that was obvious. I have to imagine this was an intentional effort to extend the book, because, like many of its ilk, it is extremely underwhelming in terms of length, which I attribute to the AI model's inability to write meaningful or interesting conversations, or really just conversations. Like a broken marriage! Okay, I never realized until reading these how much of a book is just conversations and what they get distracted by in between the sentences. This is something that AI models don't struggle with, but don't even attempt, turning what is, for many, the main draw of the literary form into nothing but the exchange of information. Very cold and machine-like, calculated, almost like, say it with me, a broken marriage. In parts of the book where pleasantry is the intention, everyone sounds like they're trying to trick Alex, like he's naive, which really doesn't help the feeling that this is all some kind of manipulative dream. That, along with the fairly significant time skips without warning and characters appearing in situations where they really shouldn't, in my opinion, the book would require less work to be turned into a fairly interesting psychological thriller as opposed to whatever it's attempting to do right now. So in summary, out of 10. For a quick change of pace, I want to talk about One the Road, which is part adaptation, part recreation of On the Road, a 1957 novel that is considered to be one of the defining works of 1960s counterculture and an American literary classic, which explains why you haven't heard of it. The book is more or less a rambling, weirdly formatted narration of road trips so heavily inspired by the author's real life, it may as well be dictated in real time. Ross Goodwin's One the Road doesn't work, but I respect it. More or less is dictated in real time. The specifics get a little complicated, but to generalize, Goodwin drove from New York to New Orleans in a car that had been fitted with several types of sensors, which were then fed into and spat out of an early text-generating neural network. I do mean early, this was in 2017, which may as well be a different universe at this point, and it shows. The intrigue of the book is that you're basically reading real-time data, and that's attempted to be turned into some kind of poetry. It's interesting because it sucks, because the machine gets things wrong and it can't do it very well. It's interesting in this video because of how little it has in common with everything else I'm talking about. None of it is lazy, it required real, genuine knowledge and actual work, along with a considerable amount of time spent. And while it's still not that good of a book, as critics pointed out at the time, it's better and more interesting than everything else in this video, as it even reminded me of a past where we were excited about technological advancements instead of begging for our lives to like a checkout at Woolworths. Speaking of, Anaya Hawke, Soundless Secrets, by hopefully pen name, and sound I make choking back a sneeze, Samuel Den Hartog. Bless you! Soundless Secrets is the first book of the Anaya Hawke series, which is obvious from the title, and frankly it would be a little arrogant to assume the book is going to be a series before you publish the first one, but when you can release a book every 3 days, I guess it doesn't really matter how many people read it. The novel is only slightly longer than YouTube Kids, but thanks to its interesting characters, electric action, and unique pacing, it makes a comfortable afternoon read into a generation-spanning curse upon my family name. Don Harthoff, the evil one. This is where another fault of the machines is on full display. Implications are an extremely important part of literature, and I'm the only person who's ever said that in a not creepy way. You can get a lot of artistic mileage by going absolutely nowhere. If a character is too stunned to speak, it makes the topic of conversation have more weight and drama, when in reality the author probably couldn't think of anything to write. All of the novels in this video struggle to shut up and stop talking. Soundless Secrets in specific suffers from this, as it endlessly describes the high-tech implants that allow her to be an effective detective. A defective, if you would, because this book sucks! The first 3 hours of the book, or more specifically the first 5 pages, is a roundabout of the same basic information. She has a shower. Implants let her experience more olfactory senses. She looks outside. Great eyes, olfactory senses. She cooks breakfast. Implant knows olfactory. That's present in all these books. Everything is just described without implication, which means most of the book is retreading descriptions you've already read, like a VCE science textbook that somehow has worse pacing. Really, that's the picture they chose. We're privy to the main character's thoughts, but the book isn't through her perspective, really. This, along with the over-description, leaves no room for imagination or critical thinking. Everything happens without confusion, without misinterpretation. Everything is explained the moment it happens, and it is always true. It's more akin to a SparkNotes page of the book than an actual book. It obviously doesn't have a SparkNotes page, but if you are willing to make one, I will do whatever it takes to stop you. The literal plot of the book doesn't really matter. It's a murder investigation of a wealthy man. It's solved, the killer says. It was just a chess piece on the board, gesturing off-screen to something grand so that you don't have to be held accountable to changing it in the future. Kind of like saying that the plot doesn't matter so that you don't have to describe it in detail in a YouTube video. This type of literalism and cold efficiency bleeds into the characters as well, as few as there are. All the motivations are very neatly defined. Complex traumatic experiences have their boundaries just explicitly and clearly laid out for the viewer, if those characters even exist. Anytime someone is mentioned, it is an almost certainty that they will not show up again, and probably don't really have a purpose to exist at all. It's mentioned that Anaya used to date a detective named Michael. I'm not going to make a broken marriage joke, but split because the overwhelming senses from her cybernetics caused a rift between them. But that's already been described to us in like 70% of the book so far, so he doesn't really need to exist, and he's never mentioned again. Early in the book, among one of the 1,000 diatribes explaining how implants have increased her senses, a specific description of her eyesight claims that she perceives the visible light spectrum far beyond the human range, catching hints of ultraviolet and infrared, creating a vivid, rich experience akin to a kaleidoscope. This is done because AI models heavily lean on figurative language, but over-explaining them kind of ruins the whole point, and in this specific instance kind of contradicts itself. The purpose of this paragraph is obviously to show that Anaya has amazing eyesight, a useful tool for a detective, which is capped off by an evocative, if overused, metaphor. However, seeing the faintest hints of ultraviolet and infrared is less far beyond the visible light spectrum and more directly adjacent, because they're next to the visible light spectrum. Seeing hints wouldn't be a sensory feast, it would probably just make windows slightly darker. On the flip side, if she could see way past the regular spectrum and did see significant parts of infrared and ultraviolet, it's not exactly faint hints, and normal life would be rather overwhelming. Adding just infrared would basically double the light that the sun gives off, and you would get cataracts by 40. This does show up in less important moments, but it is just as noticeable, like when interrogating the murder victim's business partner. He flounders, he flops. It's like an LA Noire NPC. He all but tugs on his shirt collar and says "gulp" out loud, and yet the book describes Anaya as picking up on subtle tells, like an earthquake and cannon fire. There isn't really any more to the book. It's technically pretty short, and the only recurring through line is the tragic childhood backstory because of her brother's untimely demise that motivates her to become a detective, and that's pretty much it. I've read pamphlets with more varied stories. The last book I read was Secret Gate of the Gods, which I only found because of the Goodreads reviews that was mixed between people highly recommending it and people complaining about sock puppets. I don't know who to believe. Is it this person with over 1,000 reviews who engages in conversation within the comments, or Texas Girl, 7 reviews? If only I had cybernetics so that I could be doing something else. The book's a little bit Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer, a little bit Jack the Giant Slayer. Thrilling, as long as you can get past the issue of it sucks, it's boring to read, and those movies are bad. The general premise is Arya was European royal something, wartime, orphaned, American codebreaker, World War II, asked to help in France, and then is wrapped up in a conspiracy and secret societies. This all sounds terribly interesting, and I know that you're clawing to read the book, but the plot is delivered with the same pacing and artistic flair of how I just described it. Like a continuous delivery of facts. The best way to make art. It's very much going through the motions of a real book, where the things that need to happen do, and then we're done. Anything superfluous to the plot isn't mentioned. There's no discussions, there's no walking around involved in your thoughts. It's at one point the main character is asked to go to France specifically. She says she needs to think about it. Immediately afterwards, she's talking to her foster parents, but she's already decided to go. They don't have a discussion weighing up the pros and cons because the book needs her to go, so everything else is just set dressing. It's extremely strange. Also, everything that I've mentioned about the plot so far has been the first 10 pages. The pacing is breakneck. As in break my neck, I want this to be over. Unlike any book I have ever read. I would say it's utilitarian, but in reality, the best description is probably brutalist. There's no grace or dexterity found within these pages. At one point, the mysterious figure, I said mysterious, the mysterious figure of the story, Leon, does the classic, "How will I know to find you again?" And he says, "I'll find you." Gripping. First off, dude, back off. Secondly, he doesn't just show up in the same chapter, but within 3 pages. He's been gone for 10 minutes tops. What are you doing? It bleeds into the characters as well. As it turns out, if you don't actually need or want any part of a book that isn't necessary and solitary actions don't really exist, you don't need that many characters. The first chapter introduces 7 named characters. 2 of them are removed, and then the rest are ignored. So despite the premise of the book being like a secret society, it's more of a secret book club, and every week's discussion is the Waffle House menu. It's not that characters of importance don't get named, although that does happen because what author hasn't accidentally referred to a pivotal character as Shady Man? My scripts don't have character names. I'm playing someone referred to as Book Freak. There is, however, a recurring pattern of naming the wrong people. Eventually, things go bad. I'm not going to explain it, and we get short slices of a catastrophe all around the world. But all the snippets go out of their way to name a character that has no bearing on anything, are never mentioned again, and most of them die. Not that it would particularly matter either way. I wasn't clawing for more characters or really any more of the book. Perhaps it was the fatigue at the end of the marathon, but by the end of the first chapter, I was genuinely struggling. Thank God for today's sponsor, Fairyland Yang Shao. I found this at a thrift store several years ago. I had no idea what it was, and it looks at least 30 years old. I bought it immediately. I never really had the time to watch it, but suddenly, out of nowhere, reading chapter 1 of this book, I had the time. Turns out it's a promotional video for Yang Shao, or more specifically a VCR transfer of a promotional video, with the left ear speaking Chinese and the right ear speaking English, making neither legible. I watched the entire thing, and had infinitely more fun than reading this book. Here is a short peek.
So beautiful, that champagne, the point of the 8th century, ever composed the following poem.
You got it one at a time. Don't buy this book. Don't buy any AI book. Buy Fairyland Yang Shao. And if this is the only copy, get bent. It's mine. And if I'm pronouncing that wrong, although by happenstance, it appears that the second chapter is somewhat more of a natural cutoff point than I thought, because very randomly, the characters' conversations are now prefaced by the emotion or delivery in parenthesis. And I don't necessarily have a critique for this, but it's weird and you shouldn't do it. I feel like that's pretty obvious. I would love to summarize the book succinctly, but it devolves so quickly. By the end of it, titles and godhood are being thrown around like a North Korean military parade, by which I mean, with no exaggeration, the Percy Jackson books remain more grounded in reality than a book whose first few chapters are in World War II France. This book is garbage. The truth is, no matter how these books came out, I still wouldn't like them. And in a sense, meeting them on that level is partly a mistake, because these books are not bad because of what is in them, but instead because of what they are. These things are products of an unflinching, unfeeling thing that is as willing to bend to the passionate as it is the illiterate or uncaring. A terrible, horrific fan fiction is an infinitely more artistically rich creation than anything that comes from these infernal machines. Intention, and as a result, mistakes are very much part of the creative process, and that process is the entire reason to care about any of this. I watch Formula One not because the cars go fast, but because these freaks of nature make them go fast. If the process didn't matter, the entire sport could be replaced with a straight line sprint where we just fire bullets at the finish line. The process is everything. Great pieces of literature, of any work of art, are great because they could have been bad. Because it's more likely that they would be bad than good. The odds are stacked against the creator every single time, and yet, look at what they have done. The authors of these books should have their computer privileges revoked like small children. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I'll probably be putting up a less focused and less professional video on a second channel. I'm going to link it, talking about how just certain things that didn't make it into this video. Make sure to buy my merch, and if you haven't watched the last video, go watch it. Although I'm not sure what, at this point you should be clued in. Thanks to the fellas for supporting me. You can join them by becoming a member. Is there anything else I needed to mention? Create art. Create anything. Do something. In my free time, I've taken to binding books, and I'm not very good at it, but I enjoy it thoroughly. I have one here. It's the first one I ever did, and it's really, really bad. But it is 100% my work. And then I got better, and I enjoyed every second of it. Make something and make it bad. God bless America. God, this is really bad. Okay. I did a little leg flick if you couldn't see.